sign-in sheet. We'll get this thing on what's going on.
He's gonna broadcast it on his Facebook. Just, I know. Not that.
What's going on, man? Hey, man. I see you down over here. I'm gonna be back.
Like I say on the job, I brought a car back, my boss comes around and goes, "What's that? Wait a second." Just take a picture. And I'm like, yeah, he stood beside me, took a selfie, and they had a staff social media page just for staff. So we like to post that and say, hey, here's a new hire. You see her around, you know why. And the other boss asked me, he says, "Is you okay?" Yeah, Alex heard it. It's okay. You can post my picture. I'm not. I'd like to ask I'm outside. The wind was blowing. I'm outside already. Luckily, I just had it cut by Vanessa, and it wasn't all. Probably working. I imagine Saturday's a busy day. They were here yesterday. You know they got me. I figured it happened. Before she posted it, yeah. It took me a minute because she was like, yes, 1,000 times yes. And I thought, well, yeah, that's a really nice fingernail. Oh, sorry. She's not pretty. Yeah, it's pretty, isn't it?
All right, guys, we're going to get going here. Thank you for coming. All right. So this is an all-recovery meeting. My name is Rich Jones. I'm the CEO of the organization. I'll talk a little bit more about myself as we go through. We do this meeting in a wide variety of ways. Sometimes we have a speaker meeting. Sometimes we have an open share. If you haven't been to this meeting during a regular meeting, we would encourage you to do that as well. That's Monday through Saturday at noon. There's a calendar out front. We offer a bunch of other meetings. We would also encourage you to check that out. We host 12-step meetings. You're going to hear throughout the presentation today, and if you become the Favor Greenville, you know this. We believe that people find, actually, let me rephrase that. We know what the facts are around recovery. And the facts are that people find recovery in a wide variety of ways. The media and conventional wisdom has told us that there's one way to get it done, because when you're making a movie, it's really cool to send the person off to rehab, and then they come back and they go to meetings and they live happily ever after. That really works well for media. It also works well if you're doing a reality TV show. But if you look at it, the range of options and ways that people get better, it's almost like the sky's the limit. Some people figure it out on their own. They go see a therapist, they start talking to somebody. Some people go to meetings all the time. Some people go to meetings and go to a therapist and use a combination. Some people use medication support along the way. At Favor Greenville, we don't care how you get better, we just want you to get better. Does everyone understand that? Like, we have no dog in the fight on how that thing works. And I've learned that in my own personal recovery, and I've learned that professionally over the years, that if you give people support and you give people information, they start to get better. So that's our objective along the way. And to that end, we wind up talking about a lot of other things, guys. We wind up talking, it's not always about how do I not use today. Obviously, that's going to probably be the primary stuff you'll hear if you come to an all-recovery meeting, but you're also going to hear about health, wellness, quality of life. I mean, what's the purpose of, stop drinking and you still have problems in your relationship? What's the purpose? Stop drinking and you still can't perform at work or lead a healthy lifestyle. So we want to go beyond that and think of it, it's not about surviving. What's it about? It's about thriving, right? It's about because the other interesting thing, especially, you know, at least when I got in recovery, I'm in recovery 19 years. You know, I got it, and I got it as old school as you can possibly get it. When I got in recovery, there was no other options. The only thing you knew was 12-step, and the group I was part of was pretty orthodox and pretty fundamentalist, if you will, and I loved those guys, and it worked for me, and I thank God every day for that. But what I know is that was weird as I started to go through that is I noticed that we use terminology like as if we were different from the human race. You know, we would say things like addict thinking or addictive thinking. Or we would even, in certain cases, say things like they are normal people or earth people. I don't know if anybody's heard this stuff. I reject that out of hand, guys. I reject that 100% out of hand as a professional, as a psychologist, and as a human being. I'm a person who has a very specific health care issue. It happens to be called, it's not even called addiction. We throw the word addiction around. It's actually called a substance use disorder. And it involves my brain, and it happened over time. And did I give it to myself? Yeah, I guess I gave it to myself, but just like people give themselves diabetes, right? Just like, I mean, you name a disease, I can make an argument that we give it to ourselves. And people recover from those as well. But they don't identify themselves primarily as a diabetic. They identify themselves primarily as a person. And that's the orientation here at Favor. And that's why we talk about things like positive psychology, because positive psychology is a toolbox to help you try to get there, okay? The history of positive psychology is interesting. It was literally developed because there was never anything available. There were always, let me take this back, there were always things available to help a depressed person become a little bit better. Like Sigmund Freud, for example, said that the goal of psychotherapy was to get the person to ordinary human misery. That's not very exciting, is it? Yippee! Can't wait to see that guy. And Sigmund Freud, we all know that he was a cocaine addict anyway. He wouldn't get too much traction in today's world. At any rate, there's a lot of orientation toward that. Take this medicine so you don't want to kill yourself, right? Take this medicine so you can get out of bed. And that's cool and that's necessary, but what positive psychology focuses on is maybe you're at a 5 and you want to get to an 8. Or maybe you're at a 3 and you want to get to a 6. Do you guys get this? It's like, what can I put into my life on any given day that's going to help improve my mood, improve relationships, decrease stress, decrease anxiety, those type of things. That's what this is about. And what we know is, here's how, so what they do is when they develop positive psychology, it's been around since 1993. Like any other discipline, they dive into the research. And they start going around the world and asking people, are you happy, and what makes you happy, and what are the qualities, and people think they have these ideas in their mind on what makes a person happy, but when you dig into it, there's actually some universal human issues around happiness. The first thing is about half of our happiness is genetic. You are born with a certain disposition. Would you all agree? If you know, you probably know people in your life who are happy no matter what. And you're like, what are they on? Right? That was a joke, but didn't go over very well. Just nothing. They seem to be more optimistic. And at the same time, how many people have known a grumpy person? Not like a grumpy person in a bad way where you hate them, but I know people in my family, we joke about how grumpy they are. They're just a grumpy guy. That is part of the process. It's 50%. And 10%, and I want to acknowledge this, I'm going to talk more about it, if you have circumstances going on in your life that aren't too good, it will bring down your mood. Logical stuff, right? But that only accounts for about 10%. A lot of times people have trouble believing this. When I do this in family group, and I tell the parents that, because they're in the middle of a storm with their kids, and I say, well, this is going to pass, and what you understand is this really is only going to affect about 10% of your overall happiness if you work on some things. They don't believe me. And when I was going through this stuff with my son this summer, when he had that health scare, I wouldn't have believed that either. But if you look at the overall picture, what tends to happen with extreme events, guys? They tend to what? Come and go. Think about it. Really, really good stuff does happen. Really, really bad stuff does happen. And when the good stuff happens, what? It puts us in a good mood. And when the bad stuff happens, the sky is falling. It's never going to get better. But the reality of life is, and you hear slogans that apply to this. What is it? This too shall pass. This too shall pass. And if it all evens out, it only adds up to about 10% in terms of overall happiness. This is where we're going to camp out today. 40% of your mood on any given day at any given time can be influenced through direct actions and intentional efforts. The way you think, the way you approach other people, the things you do in your life. Little things like whether you spend time outside. We've talked in here about the free three before. The free three, and I don't have it in this presentation, but some of you are new, so you're going to, at the very least, you're walking out of here with a tool that's guaranteed to work if you do it 30 days. Money back guarantee. Go outside, listen to music, and laugh. Those three activities have been proven through research to raise people's moods about 18 to 20%. What is that all about? Getting out in the sun is a good thing, right? Getting out in nature is a good thing. Laughing, that's obvious. I mean, that's like contagious. And then music. Now, I recommend upbeat music. East Coast rap, late 90s kind of deal. But whatever you're into, that's right. Throw it up, throw it up. All right. And so, now, the thing about all of these techniques that we talk about today, and we talk about when we do these, none of them, this is, I'm talking to a group of people in recovery, so we can talk like this. None of them work as well as getting high. What do I mean by that? It doesn't affect you immediately like that. It doesn't feel that way. Do you guys get that? It's not, because the problem is we're instant gratification creatures. We want, if I'm gonna go outside today, because Rich told me to, I better feel better. Or, if I'm gonna watch TV and get something to make me laugh, and my mood doesn't improve, Rich is a bullshitter. Let's understand it doesn't work that way. What happens? It builds up over time. It's like physical exercise. How does physical exercise work? Do you go to the gym one time and all of a sudden you get the gain that you're looking for or the weight loss that you're looking for? You got to go every day. You got to stick to your routine. This is no different. This is exercise for your brain. Does everyone get that? And it's been researched, looked at, and it's been proven over time. This is who I am from a professional standpoint, guys. I'm sociologist, I guess, or a psychologist, and a lot of different licenses, a lot of different degrees. Really spent the majority of my career working in clinical settings. I've started like 3 or 4 different rehabs, done a lot of stuff in community mental health. This is the other thing I want to emphasize. I have a strong orientation on the mental health side of things, which has given me a little bit of a different viewpoint on the recovery process. I think it's allowed me to see that there's more to it than maybe meets the eye. Rich's experience isn't the universal experience. Do you guys get that? Have you ever heard anybody say, in my experience, da-da-da-da? Well, understand when they're saying that, that only applies to them. Because what I have found out is that there are a lot of complex issues out there. And none of us, I firmly believe this, none of us are going through this life without some type of experiences, trauma, underlying stuff. That's part of being a human being. You're going to take some lumps along the way. And we need to acknowledge that that's part of the equation as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. I'm also a person in long-term recovery. In my case, it was alcohol way before the pills came on board. But in 1999, and so I want to go on the record, I don't blame a doctor for my addiction. Do you guys get that? Because I was primed to become addicted to these opioids. I had an alcohol issue way before I got in a car accident, but got in a car accident. You guys know the story from there. You go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, police come, you walk out of the emergency room with a 120 Darvocet, and what is it? It's like game on. And 2 years, doctor shopping, Western Pennsylvania, right at the height of the opioid epidemic, when doctors were being told, don't let anybody feel pain, don't let anybody feel pain. And I did the thing and suffered all the consequences, guys, right up to the end where, suicidal ideation or whatever label you want to put on it. Because that's what happens when you don't know what you're dealing with, and you just go with it and go with it and go with it, and you try to figure it out on your own, because I wouldn't talk to anybody, because I was stigmatized and I was embarrassed, and you weren't going to get me to say that I was addicted to anything. Fortunately, there was an intervention done. My family, at Favor Greenville, we're huge on the family programs. We serve about 10,000 families because I'm passionate about it. I would consider myself a family therapist, but I'm also passionate about it because I believe it saved my life. Because I wasn't going to get it. Do you guys get that? Like, I wasn't going to approach that door. But my wife and my mom formed what I like to call the unholy alliance. They started talking to each other, going to Al-Anon, and they started to learn about this, and you know the rest of the story. My using days were coming to an end. And I've been in recovery for 19 years. All right? So that's who I am. And I've been here at Favor as the CEO for 6 years, believe it or not. In Favor Greenville, just because people should notice, we've literally distinguished ourselves as the premier recovery organization in the nation, receiving back-to-back national awards, one by the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, that's the treatment arm of the federal government, and then this past year by the Department of Justice, which is the legal arm. So literally the people who treat you and lock you up both said we're the best. And that is rare. That's really rarefied air. You don't see that very often. So here's one of the, so I didn't bring the book in. I don't, has anybody ever seen the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness? Have you ever seen that? Do you know that there are 297 diagnoses in there? 297. If you ever want to be entertained and or outraged, go through there and see what is a diagnosis that you can get these days. There's literally a diagnosis. It used to be called, he's a bad kid. It's now something adolescent pre-depressive disorder. Everything is getting labeled. Do you guys get this? And I'm not discounting mental health issues. Let me go on the record. I'm a therapist. I'm a mental health therapist. Mental health issues exist. But sometimes there are other explanations for things as well. Like, for example, before you diagnose yourself with depression or low self-esteem, first make sure you are not, in fact, just surrounded by assholes. Because that's also another explanation, right? And more than ever in our culture today, now remember how human beings are wired. Human beings are wired to compare themselves to other people. That's how we kind of knew where we stood in our groups. That's how we knew where we stood. And from an evolutionary psychology point of view, it was very important to know, am I accepted by the tribe? Why was it very important? Because it was dangerous to not be accepted. So our tendency, you guys have heard the term self-esteem, that kind of stuff. Our tendency to measure ourselves up is, it's almost impossible for us to get rid of that. It's hardwired in us because it's a protective thing. Does that make sense to everyone? And so we compare ourselves to people, but now we live in a world, really since 2007 when cell phones exploded, where we have the opportunity to constantly compare ourselves to people via social media and the like. And so we also want to talk about, this is a great picture, right? This is what goes on Facebook. And all her friends from high school are like, oh, she's the perfect mom, look at that. Meanwhile, it's a trap house. And nobody can see it. And so, you know, this phenomenon today is probably, it contributes to the absolutely outrageous increase in depression, anxiety, and really what they've been measuring is loneliness. They've been talking to people in America and record levels of loneliness. Many people can report that they're like connected to 5,000 people, but they don't feel like they have a good friend. This is a phenomenon we have to acknowledge. And I don't know what your relationship is to social media. I like to use social media to spread my message. I like to use social media to kind of like push out favor information. I'll get jammed up about social media from a professional standpoint. Like, if somebody gets invited to speak at a national conference, I'll automatically look at them and say, I know more than that person, and I'll get all up in my head, why wasn't I invited? But I've never looked at social media and been jammed up about an ex-classmate or anything. That just isn't. But if you do get jammed up about that stuff, you want to regulate it. You guys get that? You're taking a hit. And I'm not calling that depression, but I'm telling you, like, that's going to chip away at you at times. And if you have young kids or anything, I mean, really, we got to pay attention to this if we're parents, because especially among girls, record-setting levels of cutting behavior, record-setting levels of anxiety. Because what are they doing? They're looking on there all the time, and they're seeing where do they fit in. There's two terms. One is called FOMO, fear of missing out. And the second, which is worse, is called FOBLO, fear of being left out. If you are a 14-year-old and you're looking at Facebook and you didn't get invited to the birthday party, you're taking a hit. So we have got to start to figure out how to handle that. And I'm throwing it out there just as you kind of put it through your own sort of data bank and what's your relationship to this. And some people will take social media breaks. Has anybody ever done that? Gotten off and shut it down? Yep. You also have to be really, really careful on social media on how quickly that you can get brought into conflict. Have you ever noticed that? And how it is not even like within the realm of social norms on how we act. There's so many things that people say to each other on social media that they would never say to each other face to face. Number one, because you're going to punch me in the throat if I say that to you. And you can't do that through the screen. Number two, I can't see your reaction, so I can't feel bad about the way I just hurt you. So we got to be careful on how we. I feel like the older you are, probably the better you are with this. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know. Would anybody be willing to share whether they felt like it was helpful to take a social media break? Has anybody done that? Did you do that? Did you feel like it helped at all?
I think it helped a lot.
Okay.
Because I wasn't constantly checking.
Yes.
See what's going on with everybody.
Compulsively looking at it.
And one thing that I thought was kind of odd is I found myself looking up people that I hadn't seen in 30 years.
What are they up to?
Yeah, just to see
Yeah.
what they're up to.
Yep.
And the only reason I did it was because I was bored.
Yes.
I didn't, but then of course my brain starts going and I'm like comparing myself, well, I'm at this point with my career. And,
Oh my goodness, that's right out of the playbook, brother.
Yeah.
And so that whole comparison trap, that's what you want to watch out for. Because remember, you're also only getting the best part of the image. That's the other thing. You're not getting the full-blown deal on there. You're only getting the, look at me now, look how wonderful life is. And that comparison trap will eat you up, man. So let's watch it. Let's watch out for that. All right, now I do want to take a minute and talk about just the substance use end of this. And I want to acknowledge that if, depending on what stage you are in recovery, some of these tools might be a little bit harder to apply because we've got to remember this is a neurobiological process, right? It's all about dopamine. And what you have here, guys, is remember, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is released when we do anything pleasurable. It is a good thing. It tells you to go back and do more of it. So, it kept us alive because when we ate food, that was a good experience. So what? We went back the next day and ate food. And what you have here is each of these activities that all release dopamine and how much dopamine they release. Does this make sense? So food releases about a 50% increase in dopamine. All right? Sex is about a 100% increase in dopamine. But listen, compare it to methamphetamine. A 1,200% increase in dopamine. Well, you have to take away the original 100. Okay? Do you guys get that? So 12 times more dopamine is released when you do methamphetamine. You can put all the drugs in here. And so the deal is, whereas it's a good, healthy thing, can you see how, like anything else, whenever you overload it, we start to get problems? That's the primary mechanism around what is called substance use disorder severe. Now, not everyone who does drugs winds up in that situation. We have to acknowledge that. And I can't look at any of you and say you're there. And you may be struggling with that decision making in your mind. I know I did. I struggled with that for a long, long time. It's very natural to say, that's not me. But this is what's going down, that absolute flooding of the brain. Blake, were you going to ask a question?
Was the amphetamines, is that like your Ritalin, Adderall, Vyvanses versus
This would be, well, in this process, it could be any type of amphetamine, legal or illegal. If it was legal, it would imply the illicit use of it. Do you follow what I'm saying? So they're not saying that a kid on ADHD meds is hitting that.
No, I was just trying to figure what's the difference in amphetamine and methamphetamine.
Oh, there's all kinds of other stuff in here, dude, and it's literally manufactured to be delivered in a way that's
Like battery acid.
yeah, and also, it's like I think a lot of this stuff is even mislabeled to a certain degree, like especially in today's world where like drug cartels are competing. This is cranked up. So if you took like pharmaceutical amphetamines, you're getting a milder version because their interest is not supposed to be to hook you. Does that make sense? One of the phenomena that's going on right now with methamphetamine in general, guys, is that fentanyl is being put into methamphetamine with like kind of the stated objective to we want to get you addicted. So it's a weird thing. It's not a pure kind of substance. I would assume that's why it's higher, although chemically it's very similar. So here's what, yes, sir.
What do you think your dopamine levels would be at when you're getting sober and early recovery? Like I know that it's not back up to normal baseline levels.
No, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to go through this, and it's a great question. So a lot of people want to know, like, how do we come back from this, and what's it like as we go through recovery? And they're increasing the use of fMRIs and PET scans to try to help people identify that. But there's really no way to know. I'm going to tell you what the ideas are behind it and some general ideas. I know I have struggled with this in my recovery. I believe that, like, dopamine deficiency contributed to my risk of becoming addicted. I feel like I was filling in a gap, and I've had to figure out other ways to do that. Greg?
Hey, Rich, quick question. Does nicotine affect dopamine?
Nicotine does affect dopamine, but nicotine affects other things, and the primary, like, process of nicotine is a little bit different than what you just saw there. Okay, but it does affect it. The truth is, if you look at nicotine, the facts are that if you quit nicotine while you're quitting other drugs, it's easier to quit other drugs. That's not what we're told. We're told keep smoking, right? Don't change anything. But nicotine doesn't have the high. It doesn't have the euphoria in the same type of ways like methamphetamine. Nobody has ever stayed up all night taking apart VCRs and putting them back together, smoking Marlboros only. Right? Yes?
Okay, so I have a question. I've been in the program for 10 years. I've been on Adderall probably my entire life, but I still showed positive for it.
Even though you weren't.
And I was not taking it.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. That's probably something we would have to get into at another time. But what I can tell you is that there are a lot of different false positives out there. There are a lot of different things you got to do. If you are not taking something and something comes up, what I would do, the first thing I would do is go get your list of other meds that you're on in any, like even in the last month for anything.
Okay.
You start looking through them, and I would start doing research.
Okay.
So what you're going to find is that there's a boatload of things that roll over into other substances.
Okay, it
That's why,
freaked me out.
yeah.
I was like, I've been in a spinner. Like,
No, and what'll happen is see, the deal is it's not uncommon for stuff like that to happen. And that's why if you're doing like professional drug testing, you always have a backup. So if we were really doing it in a professional kind of like setting, you would get that sent in for verification
Okay.
because of that. Tina, one more question. I want to jump on some other stuff.
So those dopamine levels, does marijuana have a place in that range?
Yes, anything that is a mood or mind altering chemical, and marijuana increases, but it doesn't increase at these levels. Okay. Now again, understand that if you want to get real honest about this, guys, there's more that we don't know about addiction than we do. You guys get that? This has never been studied. It's only been within the last 10 years that there's been any money put behind research. And really the only thing that people have done with addiction historically is to say that it's a spiritual issue, and here's how you get better. You go to rehab, and then you go to 12-step meetings. There hasn't really been any research compared to like cancer or compared to other diseases. I believe what you're going to find is that as we go forward with this, addiction is much more complex. It's much more, you know how there's different types of cancer? There's different types of substance use disorder. And that's when we will get good at helping people. That's when the industry will get really good if they ever get off their stubborn commitment to 70-year-old treatment. If they ever move off of that, they will get really good at helping people, because what you will find is truly individualized solutions, right? And it won't be about what Rich did, Edwin has to do. And what you'll find is there'll be themes. There might be the majority of people do it this way, but we really don't know some of these answers. Here's a prevailing kind of like theory around dopamine and the release of dopamine. So here's what you got. And again, I'm not saying this is everyone in this room, but this is just probably one of the more common deals in this area. You have a baseline level of dopamine, and let's just say that is 10. That 1 to 10, that is the baseline. And some people either through experiences, stress can have this, can cause this, trauma can cause this. You can also be born this way. It could be co-occurring issues, or it could just be lack of dopamine. You're just walking around below baseline. Okay, this is also connected with things like ADHD, and this has kind of been proven over time. I 100% believe that was me. And this is the kid who's fidgety all the time and can't sit still. This is the kid where everything's not okay. It never enough. What's the next thing? I just jumped off that house into that pool. What's next? Right? Let me drive that motorcycle into the wall. Okay, what's next? It's like that. You're just not okay being there. And that's because you don't experience the world the way the rest of the world. This is the person who's just, have you ever been around? They don't have to be doing something. They can just sort of be there. Ever been around that person? Weird, isn't it? Like they're sort of just chilling. My wife can do that. All right, so you're walking around like that. You're walking around like that, and you're not right. It's just not okay. You're not feeling it. And then people are like, well, that still doesn't explain why you took the first drink, Rich. Here's the deal. You're walking around and you know alcohol works even before you take it. How do you know it? Yeah, look at Uncle Joe and Uncle Bob over there. How much fun they're having. What about all the commercials? I mean, the commercials are always showing you like the real hot people dancing with each other. And so you're a little kid, you're like 14 years old, and you're watching this stuff, and you don't know what that stuff's even called, but you know that there's something there. Right? And you're not stupid. Plus, you're getting little hits along the way in other areas, right? You know, maybe sugar's banging you around a little bit.
What about peer pressure?
Then the peer pressure comes in. Then you're out, and, and they're like, here, you want? And you're like, yeah. And you take it, and what a lot of people report is that they shoot through the roof, and it's like all of a sudden life goes from a black and white TV to a color TV. And you're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I say it all the time. If getting high was like getting tasered, I wouldn't have gone back for more. It was fun as shit. You guys get that? It was useful as hell. And so you're now, not only are you at baseline, you are above baseline, and you are on top of the world because it's working at this point. Can you guys, that's the whole phrase, chasing the dragon, or chasing the first one. This is why we do it. But the problem is, that's too much dopamine. And this doesn't happen the first time you do it, but if you do it over and over again, what your brain will do is it'll back it off and it'll take it from an 8 to a 6 because what it's trying to re-regulate. Does this make sense? It's like if the toilet is running, you turn the water off, so it's trying to re-regulate. So it takes you down to a 6. So now when you don't have the substance, you're kind of like, you're feeling a little bit worse than you did before. But you now know that there's this thing out there, right? So you guys know the story. You go grab it again. And boom, it still works. But then your brain backs you off. Now you're feeling crappy. You're like, I don't even know what's going down here. So you get it, boom, but you can't even get back up there. You guys relate to this? Can you remember when it started to change on you? Whatever the given substance was started to change on you. And then boom, it goes. But every time you're banging your brain with that much dopamine, it backs you off because that's dangerous. Then all of a sudden you're buried over here. And you can't even get anywhere with it. And this is what's kind of known as addiction, guys. A lot of bad stuff can happen over here, right? Because you can have car accidents, people die every day and they're not addicted. Would you agree? But this is what is kind of classically known. And it becomes, and they're compulsively seeking, and this is what it looks like. So what you have is this is what it's supposed to look like in terms of the transmission of dopamine, and this is what's going on. So this is kind of the evidence for that process. Do you guys get that? Yes?
So as far as the baseline goes, when you've gotten down to that last little portion where you're at, and then you get on MAT program, finally they tell you, okay, now we've got you baseline, but you're still taking the medication.
Yeah.
As you start to taper off that,
So there's a problem all around, whether it's MAT or not. The problem is in recovery, right? So what happens now, because remember, in recovery, you're starting here, right? So now you got to dig yourself out of the hole. Whether you're stabilized on MAT or not, you're digging yourself out of the hole, and you got to do things. I call it like days of wellness. You got to start. The more you do positive things, the more you start to climb up out of the hole. You guys understand that? Again, this is where the pathway of your own recovery you determine. But we know for sure that to recover your dopamine, First of all, you want to try to back this thing off, get stabilized from a biological standpoint, whether it's MAT or total absence, whatever it is, or however it looks, and then what? Maybe exercise programs. Maybe getting around other people releases dopamine. Being in therapy releases dopamine. You could do this, I guess, sitting on your couch and not talking to anybody. I would just make an argument that's not going to go very well. But as you do that, your dopamine climbs. Yes, Peter?
Rich, meetings a favor, would that release dopamine?
Yeah, anytime. Actually, being around any group of people does. So, unless they're jerks. Right? But look what happens. You start to climb over time. But here's the problem. You still have the deficit, dude. I still have the deficit. And I still have to deal with this 19 years later. And this is the dilemma, if that's the profile that you, because you got to what? This is my take on it. My recovery program is continuously evolving. The people that I talk to in terms of therapy, the places that I kind of go for meetings, I will not do the same thing day after day after day after day, just because somebody told me I should do this for the rest of my life. I am going to go to places and be around people who help me with this. Do you get that? And early on, that might have been, and I will tell you in my case, early on, that was really strongly like a lot of 12-step stuff. Then it was a heck of a lot of therapy. A lot of therapy. Over the last 5 to 7 years or 5 years, you can make an argument that I'm not handling this well because I'm filling it with workaholism. But my deal is that I will constantly look at that and have to deal with that. And I cannot resort to going out and getting a case of beer tonight to deal with that. That's a decision I've made. Do you guys understand? So, and this is what it looks like over time as you start to get better. Now, this only goes out 100 days, but what you can see is it's the reverse of the other one I showed you. So this is kind of your question, like what happens over time? Nobody knows for sure. But you do know, I can tell you some of the factors on whether or not you're going to bounce back. The younger you are, the quicker you bounce back. One of the hardest things about young people in recovery is they do start to feel a lot better quicker than older people. And so what happens then is they start to think maybe I'm good to go. You guys get that? But you do bounce back. Now here's the other factor, guys. These are the studies, and it's hard to see. So what they're measuring here is they're measuring stress level, and they're measuring life satisfaction. And this is stress. The light blue line is stress. Very logical. This is active addiction. You get into recovery, and stress levels go way down, right? Mm-hmm. Why?
You ain't making a mess of your life no more.
The police aren't coming by anymore. Mom, isn't yelling at me anymore. My wife has left me back in the house. But then what's interesting, if you extrapolate this out, as time goes by, stress levels start to go up. What happens then? Life shows up. And it's the exact opposite for life satisfaction. Have you ever heard of the pink cloud? This is the pink cloud. Everything's great, and then over here you start to go down. So what happens is, and what I would argue is that that's whenever you're getting to this point. Okay? That's whenever this is now who you are, dude. This is where you're at, Rich. You got to get this figured out. Hey, it was great for that 18 months when people were just happy that you weren't stealing their pills and throwing up on anybody. That was wonderful. Everybody looked great. Like everybody, let's have a party for Rich. He didn't do anything weird today. But then that goes away, and it's time to rejoin the human race. And that's where the challenges can start to come in. And again, I want to tell you the timing of that could be different for different people. Here's a really interesting thing, though, guys. This is where the hope is. So what they do is you got studies around potential on this axis and time. And what you can do is you can take any given person's background and you kind of feed it into this thing called SPSS, which is a sociological database, kind of like prediction machine. And you can predict success or potential based on kind of generally agreed upon things. Education status, how much money you earn, relationship status, quality of life indicators. And you can predict anybody's kind of like outcome. Well, they did a study where they looked at people in recovery, and the purpose of the study was, what they were saying is, people who suffer from addiction should be able to receive Social Security disability. And they should be able to receive it even if they're in recovery, because addiction has made them unable to meet their potential. That was the theory that they were trying to prove. So the person who was doing this was setting out to kind of like advocate for us. But I don't like that. He's victimizing us.
We used to get checks under Jimmy Carter for being an alcoholic or addict.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
They wanted to prove it. Here's what they found out. This is actually what it looks like for people in recovery. You fall below your baseline, but then on the whole, you exceed your potential. But at 18 months, there's no way you can see that. At 18 months, you're like, no way. And the other thing, the way you define success here is different than success here. What does that mean? What does success here look like? It's usually focused on wealth, fame, yeah, that kind of stuff. What's success up here? Serenity, peace, yep, helping other people, attitude toward life. You know, I didn't punch anybody in the forehead today, that kind of stuff. And the point with this is that if you can get through, and the term that they use is the wall, but you can think of it as anything. If you can get through those bumps, if you've been in long-term recovery, I've been in recovery 19 years, I can tell you, there have been 7 and 8, and it was interesting. In all those cases, I just went through one this summer with all these family issues that I had. I wasn't thinking about using. Does that make sense? Yeah. But I was thinking about running away. I was depressed. I was thinking about, sitting on the edge of my bed on any given day saying, F this, I'm not doing it anymore. Not like I'm going to go get high, but like this isn't worth it. Those walls, if you can get through those walls, you can experience this stuff. But the danger is you give in to those walls. Just like any other human being gives into the walls. Because sometimes it's really hard to put one foot in front of the other whenever you can't see the end. Can anyone relate to that? Or am I the only one fucked up in here? Okay, all right. Okay, so that's one thing we have to acknowledge. You're going to go through that, guys. And it's not, if you're feeling down and you're feeling like you're just not feeling it, I don't care whether you're in recovery 19 years or 19 days, understand it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's impossible to avoid that. You'd have to be like a cyborg or something. And so some of the things that we're told, hold on, stick around, wait for the miracle, that's what that's based in. You're going to get through the other side, all right? The other thing I want to talk about real quick is pain, because I do want to acknowledge this. If you're having a physical health issue, it's harder to be in a good mood, okay? And so, take all of that into consideration as we go through this as well. This talks about how important it is to keep moving forward if you're in pain. Because this is the psychological process of the connection between pain and depression. So it starts out here with the pain. It moves up here with activity avoidance. You don't go places because you're in pain, right? I don't want to be around people. Progressive deconditioning means the more you don't go be around people, the more you don't want to go be around people. Does that make sense? Yeah. It means you literally start talking yourself into the idea that being around people is a good thing. And then you have more pain because you're not moving. Then you avoid more activity. You justify it more, and then this is where it turns into depression. And here's the killer. Depression creates physical pain. So now you get into this process of you're now setting yourself up into this cycle. You guys get this? And that's why if you're I'm going to talk about some things related to ways of thinking and activities we can get into, but if you're dealing with physical pain and you feel like shutting down, I'm going to tell you right now, a victory every day is going to a meeting or going somewhere and going and being around people. You can't give in to this. Do you guys get this? If you give in to this, you're setting up a cycle that could really, really become problematic. And I want to acknowledge that. The other thing I want to acknowledge, just from a standpoint, I'm sorry, I should have printed these out because it's really hard to see. We're focusing today on what's called a growth mindset. And a growth mindset is, it's kind of like the opposite of a victim mindset. It's kind of like the opposite of a scarcity mindset or a fixed mindset where, like a growth mindset is literally the sky's the limit. I'm not going to play in the NBA, all right? I get that. That's just not going to happen. But where's the limit of what I can actually attain? And who's allowed to tell me what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do? Who's allowed to tell any of you what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do? You have everybody, and I'm huge on this, especially for people in recovery, because a lot of times people in recovery, I feel like they settle for this, like, well, as long as I'm not using and I'm giving back, and I get that. We want you to give back and stuff like that, but if you ever wanted to be a doctor, if you ever wanted to go back to school and get a PhD, if you were ever told that you can't have this or can't have that, understand that all falls under this thing called a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is you avoid challenges. Obstacles are overwhelming. I tried to get back in school. Greenville Tech is, Greenville Tech has this notorious way, because I teach there, they make like everything as hard to do in terms of registration. It's like, that's too hard, I tried. Never going back to school again, can't do it. Effort is not worth it. It's just like, why am I trying this hard? Have you ever felt yourself get into that type of thinking? Usually, a lot of times it can be triggered by some circumstance that's really out of your control that really is tough. I used to run into this with a lot of guys in Pennsylvania. I was working in the Medicaid system. I worked in the criminal justice kind of clients, and they would just throw in the towel whenever they couldn't get a job because of a felony. And I'm not judging them for that. I get it. But this is what you want to do, the opposite of that. Challenges, you want to try to embrace them. You want to persist. It sounds like a lot of just sort of like self-help, Tony Robbins type crap. But I guess that's what I'm trying to sell you today. I guess that's what I'm telling you. This was huge in my life. When I got into recovery, I had a bachelor's degree in a discipline that I had no interest in, business management. I graduated with a 2.1. Literally, the day that I was going through, it took me 6 years, and the day that we were sitting there, the person that was calculating was literally saying, I think we might have a 2.0 problem here. Because there was no computers, he was doing it by hand. And if I wouldn't have had a 2.0, I wouldn't have graduated. I graduated as low in that class as you possibly can. And I told myself what? What was the story that I told myself about being a student? You're not that smart. It's not for you. You were an athlete. You're not a student. So then after that, I wait, 6 months, a year, and I get thrust back into college because in order to hold on, I had to switch careers in order to hold on to this job. I had to go back to grad school. Terrified. Telling myself what? Never going to get in. I'm never going to get in. They're not going to accept me. All that kind of stuff. Well, you know the rest of the story. I get in. I got a master's degree in sociology. I got an MBA. I've never gotten anything other than an A. And I feel like I haven't even tried that hard. Sometimes I feel like I want to go back and get a PhD just to say, this isn't like what they tell you it is. Now, that's just my story. For a lot of other people, it could be what? I never thought I could have a career in this area. Or I never thought I could have a career, period. Or I never thought I'd be able to get my own place because I have a record. I'm telling you, there are ways around things. You can push back on the system, but it sucks because it's hard. And that's called a growth mindset. There's no trick to this growth mindset. What does it take to stay in a growth mindset? Anybody want to?
Changing your thoughts.
So it takes changing your thoughts, but it's thoughts and actions. It takes changing your thoughts and actions primarily, but it takes changing your thoughts and actions over and over and over again. Yep, and it also takes this is probably almost nearly as important as being selective about who you're around. How many people have ever just been around negative people? How many people have ever been around this group where they suck, and there sucks, and he sucks, and that guy sucks, man, does that dude suck? And it's also like a lot of that guy got it handed to him, that guy got it handed to him, oh my God. Bashing other people's success and stuff like that. And then you may not be that person, but as you hang with them in that crowd, what happens? It takes over, you start to hear it, you're like, this is what you do, this is what you say. That can suck the life out of you, man. It can suck, and remember, do you guys know how they catch, what is it in Cape Cod, those crabs that are, so when it comes to catching crabs off the coast of New England, I don't know what types of crabs these are. They have a wide open cage, okay? And they put bait in the bottom, there's no lid, and the crabs all go into the bait, and any one of them could leave at any time. But what happens is when one of the crabs try to climb up and leave, the other crabs pull them down. And they will rip their legs off and shit. Like, you're not going anywhere. That's what human beings like to do to each other too. As you start to move forward, as you start to move forward in your life and your career and stuff, the people who are afraid to do things will make comments. Or maybe like even be blatant about it, because your success challenges them. Your aspiring for something more challenges them. So, and then this comes down to like the ideas of goal setting. And this is real important as you move forward. Again, early on in recovery, I feel like my main goal was what? I just don't want to, I want to get through the day. I literally remember kind of having a checklist. And I didn't think a lot beyond that. It was just like, that was a victory. I also wanted to kind of treat people right, because I was emotional, and I don't know what it was like. I mean, my first year of recovery, I was like this. I was just like, I remember coming out, I think I shared this before, but it just always stands out in my mind. We had a minivan, and there was a flat tire. It was in our driveway. Okay, that sucks. That's a flat tire, right? But I really didn't have to go anywhere. And I like had like a breakdown. I don't know how else to say it. You would have thought that like the world was ending. So for me to just get through the day was pretty cool. But then you start to get stabilized, you start to be able to think clearer, and then you're allowed to start asking yourself, you know, what would, one of the questions, this is called the miracle question in counseling. If you're ever with your therapist and they ask you this question, it's because they think you're stuck. This is what we're supposed to ask when we feel like the person is trying hard but not making a lot of progress. And the theory is that you just don't really even know what you want. Have you ever felt like that? It's hard to do therapy, for example, if you don't know what you want. It's hard to set goals. And so if you could wake up tomorrow and your life was perfect, you know, magic wand, what would it look like? And a lot of times people, they can't really think of that. And so you break it down. What would be going on with your family? What would be going on with your friends? And you're starting to like be able to, and nobody's going to take care of all these things. Do you get that? That's not what this is about. It's not about going from 0 to 60, but it's about, does anything stand out to you that you would, that you could start to take a look at? I'll give you an example. Like physical health is typically one of the ones that people are able to look at pretty clearly. You know, like even in recovery, you're feeling the bumps and bruises, and you're like, if I woke up tomorrow and it was a perfect world, I would have slept better last night and I'd have more energy. But the idea here is to like, what do you want out of life? It goes back to that power of recovery image that we just said. How do you want your life to look? How would you know if you even got there? How can you figure out where you're going to drive if you don't even know what the destination is? And this is a mental exercise that you can do. And people will sometimes come up with things like, well, I got to get a new job. I can't stand that, you know. Or I want to reconnect with a couple friends. Or maybe leisure is just like, what do you do for fun? You can make your own list too, but you guys get the general principle around that? Any questions about that exercise? So here's the best way to do that. The best way to do that is to get yourself a journal, and whatever that is for you, like it could just be a tablet, it could be whatever, and write that question at the top of the page and start writing. And just let it rip. And then put the journal away. Now you have to do it this way. Shut the journal, and the next morning open it up and read it. Don't read it right after you write it. Shut it and give yourself a minute. Now again, this isn't going to work just by you guys being here today. You'd actually have to do that. You go, Rich, it didn't work. Did you do it? No. A couple other things. We tend to do better when we focus on intrinsic goals rather than extrinsic, or internal goals versus external goals. And this is what this means. Internal goals is who we are. Who do I want to be as a person? External goals is what kind of car do I want to drive? The world wants us to focus on this. You do better when you try to line up who you are with your actions. Do you guys get that? Yeah. And so the next step, the next journaling activity would be try to figure out who you are. What do I believe in? There's one of the things that we have. We don't really do this here now. This is more was in the counseling practice, but you can get this on the internet if you just type in. If you just Google, it's called value card sort, and it lists like 125 different values that people tend to hold dear. Internal values like cooperation. Some people say, I want to be popular. Like, you're allowed to answer what you want, and then that becomes your internal goals. Does that make sense? And you start to say how, the idea is, can you align your behavior with your personal goals? But again, that's not what we're taught. We're literally taught that the way you get happy is you go buy a Lexus. Yes.
Rich, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When I was young, I could bounce back and I could do a lot of these things that you're saying. I'm almost 62 years old. Went through a year of chemo a while back, and I've done a lot of things. I'm getting older, and I can't align myself with the things that I used to, because I have to realize that I'm not that same person. So I'm dealing with a whole different set of circumstances that are kind of restricting me or limiting me to the things that I used to. So I'm trying to.
I feel like I put him there, and you're going to think he's a plant. But I swear to God, like, I didn't do this on purpose. But this is the next point, Jim.
Okay.
It's exactly that. Okay. You got to align your goals to where you are in life. And the problem is you got to remember, the goals that you had in your mind when you were younger are probably still holding on to you. Because when we're younger, we tend to be more tied into this stuff. It tends to. Have you ever hear how? And I know you were a salesperson, Jim, so you understand this. Like, you ever hear how they break out different demographics for advertising? And they focus on, like, they want that, like, what, like 25 to 35 range. Because the advertising is most effective with them. And so the pursuit of sex, the pursuit of objects, the pursuit of wealth is encoded in all of us. And so when we start to look at our goals at the age of 50, we will automatically think they have to be aligned with what we were doing whenever we were 30. Because if my goal now is, you know what, I'm not going to worry about whether or not I can bench 350. I'm going to worry, and I've decided I'm going to read these 6 books over the course of the year because I'm interested in learning more about philosophy and religion. What kind of goal is that? That is a fantastic goal. And I'm going to be a hell of a lot smarter than you after I do that, you idiot. Go ahead and keep benching 350. You see? But the problem is we're so conditioned to think that old way, because remember how we are peppered all day, every day, with these media images. And again, the American economy only works if it makes us buy things that we don't need. And it only makes us buy things we don't need if it makes us feel shitty about ourselves. So, I mean, the classic one I always talk about is that Lexus commercial on Christmas 2 years ago. It's amazing. It's like they wake up Christmas morning, okay? And this woman comes downstairs, and she's like immaculately dressed, hot as heck, and just like, where the hell did that come from? Isn't it Christmas morning? That's not how Christmas morning looks at my house. Like, you're just dragging up out of bed. Dude comes down, he's all dressed up and stuff. Christmas tree is perfect. I'm thinking, what's wrong with me in my life? Like, that doesn't reflect what's going on in my house. In my house, like, literally, they've already opened the presents. My wife and I have already had 17 different arguments, okay? Neither one of us have taken a shower yet. 2 kids are over in the corner beating each other with the new toys they got, okay? And I'm like, what is going on here? What's wrong with me that that's not how my house looks? Then they go outside, and she says, oh, honey, here's your gift. And the perfect little daughter runs around the car, and what is it? It's a Lexus. So I'm like, man, I feel like shit, I better go buy a Lexus. Right? That is, if you talk to an advertiser, if you talk to these folks that are called behavioral economists and social psychologists, it's 100%, it's the playbook. Every single commercial, that's how it works. Start watching them today. Now imagine you're exposed to 5,000 of those a day. You're exposed to those 5,000 of those messages that you suck per day. And so when you start to think of what do my goals need to be, especially if you're getting older and your viewpoint's starting to change a little bit, you're going to have to, like, really truly focus on who you are. Like, this is me at 20 versus me at 49. Yeah, I had a ski shop that I ran into the ground. Turns out when you're doing cocaine and giving away skis, that's not the best way to run a ski shop. And so, you know, the goal was, can I talk my dad into reopening it for me? You know, the goal was, can we get this house on, there was on the ski slope, can we rent this house? You know, it's like real tangible, kind of like glitzy, sort of like shiny stuff. And what are my goals at 49? My main goal at 49 is I want to be here for my kids and grandkids, to be perfectly honest. And I have high blood pressure, and I need to work on this. Like, that literally is top of the list. When you're 20, you're not even thinking of that. Do you guys get that? Jim, can you relate to that? Like, you're not even, did anyone, like, what? High blood pressure? Give me another one of those things. What are those? Eating, doing whatever. I'd like to see, then I got some work stuff, I got quality time. You know what I mean? Like, it's different. And it's okay to be different. And this quote just talks about, don't be trapped by other people's opinions. Don't be trapped by what other people are telling you should think. Don't live. Now, how do you get to know yourself well enough to know what you really want can be a challenge in recovery, right? Because we've spent a long period of time in our life sort of anesthetizing our feelings, just sort of going from moment to moment. So I would argue even figuring out what that is. And I always do this because I've done this in the corporate environment, so I always say, this doesn't mean I want you to go quit your job today. That's not what this means. But you do want to take a look at this, guys.
Did you tell that guy that before he quit his job?
I've had bad experiences with this, man. Where like the company hires me to keep people employed. I own an EAP company, and so my job is literally to reduce workplace stress and for the goal of retention. And then I'm telling people like that, and they're like, "Well, what the hell? I'm moving to Costa Rica." God, that's the way. Whoa, come back.
He didn't listen to you.
And also, focus on hope. Focus on hope that you can change. I'll bring these next time whenever we get this, but this is literally a hope scale that sort of people go through. You can get into a situation where hopelessness will also suck the life out of you. If you're in a hopeless state, and this is the last thing I'm going to say because I know we're wrapping up. If you're in a hopeless state, because we all can get there, the first thing I would do is I would readjust my expectations, like today. What is it that has me hopeless that I can never get there? And can I pull this down just a bit that makes me feel like it's a more attainable kind of thing? That kind of stuff. And broaden your view on what is success and broaden your view on what is a quality life. Do you guys get that? A quality life is not like what job you have, how much money you make. The reason that I do the job I do, guys, well, first of all, I don't know if you guys noticed, I have 7 kids, so I got to make some money. And kids, like, and I keep waiting for my 26-year-old to get off the payroll, but I don't know what is going on. Why won't he? Anyway, let's not go there. I'll turn this into my group therapy session. So you got the amount of money you need to make. You're allowed to have those goals, that kind of stuff. But it will change over time, and it's okay to not have high-profile goals. Does that make sense? As long as they're your goals and you feel content, you should feel grateful that you're able to identify that. So if you feel like you're hitting a hopeless area, that's what you would do. You want to reevaluate this. All right, so we're going to stop here now for today. This is it's 1:05. Now listen, I've been trying to get my shit together for like 20 years. If I ever get my shit together, we will have a schedule here for when I'm here. And if you guys have been coming for a while, you know I've been saying that for a while. I think 6 years I've been saying I'll get you guys a schedule. Every time I say it, I'm being honest. I really am. Peter.
That's another fabulous meeting you're having.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep. And so we do want to try to get into a rhythm with this where we will be able to follow up. But I just got to get myself pinned down and see what's going on with that before I commit to anything. Bear with me on this, guys. We will continue to do these. And when I'm here on a Saturday, this is what it'll be these type of topics. It won't be a regular meeting. Again, I would encourage you to check out, though, Monday through Friday at noon. We also have some stuff going on in the evenings. Bulletin board over there has some announcements. If you think that we're kind of, if you're here, it's your first time, we want to treat you right. We want you to just keep coming back here. We really want to embrace that, man. We really want you to be around us. and with no strings attached. You get that? No right or wrong way to do it, no expectations. Just keep coming around and give yourself a chance with that. So thank you very much for being here. If we can get a moment of silence for those still suffering with this disease, and the family members brought into this no choice of their own, followed by the serenity. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you, guys. Thanks for being here.